Oh no you don't, I am not reviewing that piece of crap. You switch that intro out right now. Remember Me. Now the story of Remember Me follows Nilin, a young woman who has had all of her memories pretty much stolen from her during her imprisonment. She breaks out of prison and turns out she is part of a group known as the Errors, a revolution that is set down on taking down the most powerful corporation set on management and commoditization of memories known as Memorize. And at the same time she is on a quest to take down this corporation, and while doing so trying to gain hold of her own memories and fill in the plot holes and try to figure out, okay, who exactly is she, where did she come from, why is she involved with this revolution, and what is her significant role in part of this whole struggle. Now, I was really looking forward to Remember Me, mostly because of the idea that it's a new IP in the summer, set in this late in the console's life cycle, and it's just so many things that are going against it. In a world of sequels, remakes, and reboots, there's so many games that are coming out during this year that are trying to be big budget names. It's hard for a new person to come around, or a new IP to come around, to really garner their attention and get some word of mouth going for it. But overall, in terms of the summer releases, what did I think of Remember Me kicking the summer off? In all honesty, I have to say I'm pretty satisfied with Remember Me. I mean, it's not a masterpiece. There is one big glaring issue that I have a problem with this game, but I'll get to that later. But first, let's concentrate on what I find to be good about this game. To kick off my praises for this game, let's start with Nilin. Now, I really like Nilin as a character. I thought she was very three-dimensional. She had a nice range of emotions. In a way, she kind of reminded me of Jade from Beyond Good and Evil, in that you saw her in various moments of that. You were seeing her when she was unsure of herself, when she was frustrated, when she was determined, just having a various range of emotions. Like, you really sympathize with the fact that she's just lost her memory. She doesn't know what to do, and she's trying to find her place in the world again, and trying to piece together, okay, who was I before all of this happened, before my imprisonment and my memories were stolen from me? And so when you try to understand like the cause that she's working for and taking down this corporation, some of the aspects and missions that she has to take on, she's very frustrated and doesn't quite get why this is needed, why this is necessary, and wondering like, is what we're doing really necessary, or is it right? I mean, yes, we're trying to like help liberate people, we're trying to help them, but at the same time you're also ruining other people's lives, and some people who necessarily may not have done anything wrong to you. And now another praise I have with this game is its combo system and its somewhat flexibility in that you are allowed to mix and match however you want to change the effects of your combos together. And let me explain a little bit further. In that it kind of reminds me of Batman Arkham City in a way, where you're allowed to chain a certain button combination together and you do these very fluid animations, in that when you're mixing up your combos, there's these things called pressings, and each one of these pressings has a different type of ability. For example, one pressing can deal more damage, one pressing can deal cooldown time and increased cooldown time to make your special abilities come back faster. Another one will multiply the effects of the previous combo done before it, and the other one will say heal you as you fight. So all these ones give you a set of abilities that you can multiply and affect the way your combo works on enemies. And so when you actually integrate those into your combos, you can switch those around. Given if you have enough of them, you can alter the combo however you wish. And that makes it really interesting. For example, you can make one really long cooldown combo, or you could put aspects in your combos and say that, okay, well, I want to have this first part be all about dealing heavy damage to my enemies, and this next part to be about multiplying that damage to my enemies, and the other part being a cooldown for my special abilities. You can have a very flexible system with this. Yes, I understand that it's not the most in-depth combo system around, but it does allow for a lot of experimentation in terms of what you want to do with it and how many presents you're allowed to mix with, and tells you to really be careful and really be methodical with how you want to use this combo in an effective combat scenario. On top of the experimental combo system, there's two other things you can do in the course of the gameplay and combat that allows you to be very flexible and have a lot of fun with it. One of the things that I found very cathartic and satisfying is this thing called the memory overload. And how it works is that once you've dealt a certain amount of damage to an enemy, you can basically take them from behind and basically overload their mind with so much memory and data at once. It's pretty much like if I had to give a mental image of what this feels like, Imagine if you put a shotgun inside, like if you drilled a hole in someone's head and you put a shotgun barrel deep inside their brain and you basically pulled the trigger and it pretty much just blew out all of their mind all at once. That's pretty much what this felt like, albeit not gory at all. It's just, in a mental capacity, you basically make their brain just go overload and explode. That's really cathartic. It felt very satisfying every time I did it. On top of that is these things called S-Presses, and like these are the special abilities of the game. And some of these are really satisfying. Every one of these is pretty much very fun to use. For example, one of my favorites is something called the Logic Bomb. And how it works is that whenever you take a certain enemy, and trust me, this gets very handy in later stages whenever you have more advanced enemies coming after you, is that you basically take all this memory and data and to concentrate it into one point, you implant the bomb inside of someone's body, and you basically send this, what I think is a virus or all this spam, and put it in someone's body, and within a certain blast radius, you jump out, and it basically blows and sends a shockwave of everyone around them. It basically renders them unconscious and defeated. I just found that idea of a logic bomb, the name itself is very satisfying, and just the effect, it was really useful in terms of how you were able to stun the enemies and how you were able to clear out and focus on one enemy at a time. However, with all those combat aspects aside, there is one other thing about this gameplay that I personally found really interesting, and I found them being the most enjoyable and the most memorable, and that is these segments called memory remixes. And how these work is that you take the memory of a certain individual, and a specific memory in particular that's relevant to your mission, and you alter and tweak that memory ever so slightly for an outcome to be drastically different from the one that actually happened. And you basically change their mentality completely. And that's really interesting, is that it's almost like a moving puzzle. You have to pay attention to the environment and say, okay, maybe I need to turn the gun safety off, or maybe I need to move this little desk to like just a little bit to the right. Just ever so tweak the environment in a way that you need to basically create this kind of Rube Goldberg effect, that this one section of events may lead to another set of events that will alter the memory and ultimately lead to your objective. I've heard some critics say that there's not enough of these segments in the game, like there's really only 4 of them in the entire game, which, granted, I can understand you want more of a good thing, but here's the thing. Here's what I'm going to argue here. This is a different type of gameplay element and a new IP. They obviously can't go balls out from the very beginning. This is a very tricky thing to get right. And honestly, if you put more of those segments in this right from the get-go, it makes them less memorable. I mean, I've beaten this game a couple of days ago, and I still remember every single one of those memory remix segments, and I found them all to be very interesting and very cathartic in their own way. It's just that when you put too much of something into one thing, then you might just overload yourself and it just gets watered down and just becomes less memorable. So in my aspect, I take the idea that less is more when it comes to this game, and honestly, I found each one of these satisfying and very, very interesting to mess around with. And plus, to give you a little bit more insight, I'm one of those people that finds it very fascinating whenever I can dive into someone's head and just take the idea that, what if you just altered this one little aspect of their past or their personality, and just seeing the idea of seeing someone, maybe their personality can entirely change or be completely different from what you know, just by changing one little thing. I don't know, I'd like diving into people's heads and seeing what goes on and what makes them tick and who they are. So I have a personal fascination with something along these lines. The soundtrack is also pretty cool in that sort of cyberpunk-ish, tech, orchestral-ish kind of way. I know that kind of is a little bit confusing, but trust me, the soundtrack is pretty cool. I really liked it, and I found it to be very fitting to the setting and the tone of the game itself. And my last major praise for this game is the theme itself and what the message is, ultimate message is at the end of the game. Now, to avoid major spoilers and not ruining the experience for you folks, I'm not going to dive way too much into the theme itself. However, this does segue into my one major criticism with this game, and that is the dialogue. The dialogue in this game is sometimes really, really shoddy and unnecessary. And here's where I'm going with this idea. Now, one of the things that I've noticed during the course of the dialogue and reading through this game and understanding what the characters were saying, there was this one particular phrase that was uttered several times over by the characters saying, "Remember you soon." Now, that to me, does not work on two levels. Like, I tried analyzing this in the most objective way I could, and I noticed two things objectively wrong with this one. Number one, it makes no sense on a grammatical level. Just on a pure writing style level, that makes no sense. It does not work. Now, not only that, but it sounds weird to say, remember you soon. Grammatic-wise, it just doesn't make sense. And I checked multiple times over, on a pure writing style level, the phrase doesn't work and it's not needed. And which leads me to my second complaint about the dialogue in this phrase in particular, is that the phrase remember you soon and its constant utterance through the dialogue and through the characters in the game puts an unnecessary emphasis on a theme and the message of the game when we already know that based on the gameplay and the story and the title itself. I mean, I like to think that my viewers and my subscribers are reasonably intelligent people. If you're playing this game, titled Remember Me, you already know from the outset and from the very moment you press the start button, it's going to be about memories, remembering something, and involving someone or something important and relevant to you or maybe the characters in the storyline. And so that alone puts the theme in perspective and what you might be thinking the story is going to go in. However, with this phrase, it just creates this unnecessary beating of a dead horse into the dialogue, and it's just not needed. You don't need the dialogue to already emphasize a theme that we are already aware of as a player and as an end user of the game itself. You don't need it. It's unnecessary emphasis on a theme. And so you just need the gameplay, the story to emphasize what you're talking about. And yes, you can have the title do that as well, just to put it in context in our heads. But you don't need the actual dialogue. You need the actions of the story and the gameplay to mesh together to do that aspect. You just don't... Basically, you just don't need so much emphasis on the theme, it becomes abrasive, and therefore it affects the dialogue on both the grammatical level, and it just makes it more heavy-handed and unnecessary. You can be subtle about the idea, and this, in my opinion, the dialogue is not subtle about its theme. That's what this ultimately comes down to. So with all that said and done, my overall points come down to this. A very well-rounded, independent female lead in the form of Nilin, who is three-dimensional, who shows a range of emotions during the course of the game. A combo system and gameplay that feels both cathartic and, while it may not be as as flexible and as free-ranging as you want, it does allow for a lot of experimentation. A soundtrack that fits its setting perfectly well, that fits the tone just fine. A well-executed introspective theme that I will not spoil for the sake of not ruining your experience. However, the dialogue suffers from an unnecessary heavy-handedness on a theme that we are already aware of just from the gameplay and the stories itself, and therefore suffers the quality overall. So I would have to say, with all that said and done, my final verdict for Remember Me is that it's worth playing, but it's not perfect. So everybody, that is my review of Remember Me. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, let me ask you this question just to send this review off. What would you say is your favorite female lead in a video game or movie ever made? What's that female role that you just looked at and you're just like, that's a good character. I just love watching them, I love listening to them, and they're just a good overall character. Mine would probably be Jade from Young, Good and Evil. I just love how determined that she is, how she's so relaxed and chill. She's kind of like one of those girls that I just love to I like to hang out with. I just think that she would be fun to hang around with as a friend and just have a good time with them overall. Another honorable mention I would probably think of, Bastila Shan from Knights of the Republic. I just love how badass she was as a Jedi. She just... Oh man, if you have not played Knights of the Republic 1, just play it. It is awesome. Anyways, that's it for this review. I hope to see you next time, and until then, I'm Perry the One-Armed Legend. You name it, I can play it.